Hello, colleagues. Welcome. Welcome to Note-Taking for Consecutive Interpreting with yours truly, David Violet. You want to make lots of money. You want to please your clients. You want them to come back because you've done an extraordinarily good job of consecutive with notes. Well, come and practice with us. We have practice sessions twice a week on Fridays from 6 p.m. New York time and on Saturdays at noon New York time. Come and join us and get in some good practice. We have an initial 15 minutes with the larger group, and then we break into breakout rooms of 2 or 3 people, and you get a chance really to get in some good practice and get some great feedback. Let me give you a foretaste of that. You'll be able to see what we're doing and how I recommend that you do practice in this video. So please look at the description below. You can find lots of training. You can take my 20 module main course on note-taking for consecutive interpreting, or you can sign up for our practice sessions. So let's get going. The whole idea behind these sessions, is to practice and to find practice partners and to do a lot of practice outside of this meeting. With any coach or any teacher, or if you're a student in university, the time you have with your professor, your coach, is, I don't know, maybe about 20% of your practice time. The rest of the time you are going to be practicing with other people. One of the main goals of this session is to teach you the good way to practice and how to set it up and make it really productive. If you spend hundreds of hours, well, okay, I don't want to scare you, but I think it actually does take hundreds of hours to get good. You don't want to be doing that in an inefficient way. So what I'm going to do now is, and many of you have heard this already, and I beg your indulgence, but I'm going to go over the method for practicing. And we're going to assume that you are with one other colleague, but maybe a couple other colleagues, and all of you are interpreters or students of interpreting. The first thing you're going to do is get an appropriate recording, and that recording should be something that is at the right level. It should not be read. It should not be somebody reading a speech. It should be somebody speaking naturally, and it should not be too technical or difficult. You should be trying to calibrate it so that it fits your level of difficulty, so your level of skill, so that it does challenge you, but it doesn't, become so impossible. So, for example, once in school we did one on oil drilling, and it was absolutely undoable. Nobody could understand what's going on, and that's not productive. You want something that's really within your grasp. Now, so you are going to listen to a recording or watch a recording. Possibly you don't have a recording, so one of you will make something up and speak, or even better, you will have come with prepared talks. As you all listen, or both of you listen to this recording, you're going to both take notes as interpreters. And then, number 3, somebody is going to interpret. There's a couple of pointers I want to give on this. When you start to interpret, this is your chance to practice the big day of whatever you're aiming to do. The exam, the university exam, possibly the exam to get a glorious position in a wonderful international organization, or simply to be put on the roster of freelance interpreters for something like, the United Nations or your foreign affairs ministry, etc. So this is the big day. And Or maybe you are going to perform in front of an important client and you want this client to have you back. So what I'm trying to say by this is that you should act professionally and really pretend like the whole panel, the whole bunch of judges are there staring at you. So there's no need to say things. Don't say, oh, you know, there's part of it I don't get, or, you know, the sound was terrible, but I'll do my best. Just finish your notes and go, okay? I want you to practice the way it will be when you're with a customer, when you're with your professors, etc. Okay, so I'm not trying to be too strict. I don't want you to feel like, you know, you're on the spot, although you do need to practice being on the spot. So it's not really very useful to say things like, well, you know, the accent was terrible, I think I missed half of it, or the technical level was way beyond my skill. You can say those things afterwards, but not before you interpret. Okay, so let's practice the big day. That's part of the idea of this practice and any practice you do with your colleagues. There is a sort of a question that people ask, but can I ask, as I would possibly would in a real situation, for something to be repeated? Because when I get there, I won't be able to do it at all. My answer is yes, because it is like a real situation, but it should be about 1 out of 5 or 10 times. Generally speaking, you are not going to do that. You're not going to ask anybody. And if it's a dinner speech and the person is at the other end of the table, it interrupts everything. You spend a lot of time trying to tell the person what part of the speech you didn't get, and that person is feeling like, oh my goodness, I just finished my speech and now I have to go through my notes and figure this out. So okay, so if you're going to ask someone to repeat something because you didn't quite get it, I would say it should be about once every 5 or 10 times. One of you is interpreting and one will be listening and doing a critique. You need to listen, do as you would have your colleague do unto you, be very kind, and listen super carefully. And start taking notes on what is being said. You're going to write over your own notes as your colleague interpreter is interpreting, possibly in another color. Now, I want to tell you a note about substance and form. Substance is the meaning, the message, what the speaker meant to communicate. It's the content of what the person is trying to get across. The form is the way it's expressed. Generally, the language, the terms, the words, the way it's delivered, the speed, smooth or not, etc. That's the form. You always maintain this distinction in your mind, and that's going to be true when you practice, but it's also going to be true all through your career. This is something that you should be thinking about all the time. There's a problem of form or a problem of substance. Now, going back to those who are listening, you are going to write over the notes that you took for the original speech. You're going to write over that with your comments for your colleague. And again, you are going to make sure that you start thinking about, was this a problem of substance or a problem of form? And as I said, it's handy to use a different color of pen or pencil for the notes that you write over your own notes. And when you notice that there is something that seems to be off, it could be substance, meaning, the person seems to have communicated something that the original speech didn't communicate or left it out, or a matter of form. You're thinking, well, I think that what was the speaker meant to say sort of came across, but this certainly was a better way of saying it. When you have comments to make, write down verbatim what your colleague interpreter said. And be in a position to say, well, at this point, and then help the person find that in their notes, at this point, what you said, and then read out what you wrote down exactly. You owe that to the person that you're critiquing. Tell them exactly what the person said and help the person find it in their notes. And be ready to say, this is a matter of substance or form. And as I will tell you later, generally you'll do substance first and form later. What you are going to do in your commentary is say, because you're not perfect either, you're going to say, well, what I understood, what you said is X, Y, Z. Have that down verbatim. But what I would have said, in other words, on the basis of what I understood, is this. And then you can discuss it, maybe go back and listen to it again, although that can be very time consuming. You take time away from the following practice. But be in a position to say what the person said and what you think should have been said. At this point, one of the persons listening will give this commentary. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about how Danica Selaskovic taught me in the mid-'80s and how I teach to give this commentary, this critique. First of all, you want to judge the method. What is the method? The method, first and foremost, is that the person is actually interpreting. The person is not transliterating. The interpreter is not failing to understand and just going from word to word, whether the person seems to have written the notes about something they understood or just written down words they did not understand. These are the errors of method. So you're going to give a first impression and tell whether you think the method is being followed. And as we know, at least I think everyone is being taught this day, that when you listen, you're trying to acquire genuine knowledge about what is being said and then express that knowledge, about that understanding with natural target language, avoiding false cognates and all of that, of course. After you've given this is point number one about the method and a general impression, you can start on matters of substance. And the reason that this is separated into substance and then later into form, I think it'll become clear for you. But for one thing, if I tell you that you said something wrong, often it's confusing. Do you mean I said it wrong or that what I said is not what the original said? So you need to be, as someone receiving criticism, you need to be able to make that distinction all the time. So anyway, we're going to start with substance, with what went wrong, what was left out, if anything. And the idea here is to figure out what was left out, what was wrong, and why. Let's say there's two of you practicing. You're going to work together to figure out what went wrong. The whole process, this is like an assembly line, right? We go from the source language where there may be many problems, an accent or the speaker was too fast. All kinds of problems could happen in the source language. Or it could be a problem in the way you took notes. You might have started thinking too much about your notes and stopped listening. You may have actually understood everything, but you didn't know how to note it, so your notes are not good. Or you may have notes and understood everything, but when it comes to saying it, you just didn't find a very good way of saying it. It's a whole process, right? And what you want to do is nail down what went wrong. And as the person receiving criticism, you want to pay very close attention and you want to practice with various people. And notice, what are people saying? What tends to be happening over and over? What is my weak point in here and there? And then you want to devise exercises that will help you to address those weak points. That's called deliberate practice, right? So it could be that the person suspended listening because they're distracted by the notes or couldn't understand the language or a term, or they didn't know what to write, or what they did write was illegible, things like that. Figure those out. Let's say that you come to a word and it's absolutely illegible. You're going to have to find out, you're going to have to work on your handwriting or perhaps use symbols. And then in a number 3 phase, you're going to start having comments on the form. Okay, you've figured out the matters of substance that went wrong, and now we're going to look at the matters of form. Okay, so like together, and especially if one of you is an A in the target language, that is a mother tongue, you will start saying, well, the way you would say it, the best way in this language would be this or that, and probably we'll take notes on that. And the whole idea is to, and then you will know, if I had a problem of form, like especially when you're going into a B, we're going to devise exercises to enrich our B, to activate the passive vocabulary that we have in a B. You might find that, okay, an Indian accent in English seems to be very hard. Well, you're going to have to listen to a lot of Indians speaking English, etc. Or have the notes stopped you from listening because you were concentrating on how to write. That is very common. Then you're going to have to work on that. A little note about when you're giving the criticism, try to prioritize. Don't give 25 different points. It doesn't have to be exhaustive. Try to nail down 3 or 4, 5, 6 points of substance, and that should be enough. And probably you will go through it chronologically, skipping very small matters and trying to nail the big ones, because going through it chronologically means you can go through the notes together and figure out where you are in the speech. And always make sure to help the person find her notes in the speech. Tell the person what they said verbatim, because you've written this down when you were taking notes on their interpretation. Don't try to spend too much time debating, well, I think he's meant this, I want to think that. That happens, and it could be interesting to find out what actually was said because you learned something, but try not to spend too much time on that. It should be a time where you can both do lots of practice. So that's the summary of how I recommend to practice.